Cool, over to you, Ben.
Okay, well, I'll just sort the sharing the screen. Okay. Yeah. Okay, well, croeso pawb, croeso i'r sgwrs yma. Dwi'n mynd I siarad yn Saesneg heno, dwi'n hapus I derbyn cwestiynau mewn Cymraeg neu Saesneg. Hwna just mwyn amser gyda llaw. Welcome everyone, thanks for joining us. I can't see who's with us and who's not, but you're all really welcome. And I mean, the first thing to say is thanks to everybody that helps Swifts, whether that's us, through us, the Wildlife Trust, or on their own bat, or through other organisations. I think it feels like there's a sort of growing community of people in North Wales who do really care about these birds, and they definitely do need our help. They are a really vulnerable species. They've declined by 72% in the last couple of decades in Wales, which is very drastic, really, and so we need to do all we can to try and help them. And I'm really glad that people are interested and inspired by them, and goodness knows they are amazing creatures. So thanks to everybody. And I'm also going to, before I say anything else, I've made a sort of vow this year that whenever I sort of talk about swift decline, that I'm also going to talk about insect decline. Because I'm more and more convinced that those two things are connected, and so I won't talk about that much, but I'll just say that we are generally becoming much more aware that insects are really in trouble. If the studies in Germany are similar to what they are here, then that's a 75% decline as well. Across the board with airborne insects, and that's huge. That's going to affect other birds as well as swifts, of course, but I mention it because a lot of the work that we've been doing up until now has been to do with addressing the problems that swifts have at their nest sites, but of course there's a whole lot of other stuff that might be to do with their ability to find food, and so we think it's really important that we think about it in the whole, and that if you can get involved with campaigns like Action for Insects, brilliant. And I would also like to mention something that happened, that's happened in the last sort of 12 months is the brilliant stuff that the Youth Forum has done. Their insect apocalypse debate was really, interesting and thought-provoking and fantastic sort of work on how we can start to address this and how we can get people to be more aware of this issue. So that's just a mention for insects that I wanted to have. Okay, I'm just going to carry on. I'm hoping everybody doesn't see. There we go, that's better. Right. Okay. So some swifts. So I'm all going to do. Oh, hang on. That's changed. Okay. Let me just get that back. Okay, sorry, that was just I was distracted by something there. Okay, so one of the things that happened this year, I'm just going to go through the year more or less from my point of view. So it's very just much my take on what's gone on this year. But then hopefully at the end, other people can chip in and maybe mention things that they've been up to or that they've come across this year. So in terms of the Wildlife Trust, we've been working on Swiss for about 7 years with varying sort of scales of ambition and success, depending on funding and everything else, and increasing knowledge and understanding and help from other partners and things. One of the good things that's happened this year is that we've managed to get funding to work in partnership with the Snowdonia National Park to try and put up boxes and where possible sound systems to attract swifts. And so that allowed us to do some work down in Llanuwchlyn, which is by all accounts a bit of a Swift hotspot. And this is thanks largely to David Roberts, who's the senior ecologist with the national park, and his sort of local knowledge here was really useful. And me and my colleague Anna Williams went down, met with David, and he showed us around, showed us some of the Swift sites, and then I was able to come back later in the spring with a cherry picker and try and put up some boxes. So that's the sort of thing we want to try and do, is like work with specific kind of hubs for Swifts and try and build on places where they're already doing well and expand the populations that way, rather than just kind of randomly putting up boxes here and there. We're going to try to be a bit more strategic about it. So this is one of the sites that we put some boxes up on in April. April was a weird month. I don't know if you remember. It was really, really cold this year. Actually got, the first time I tried to do this job, I actually got snowed off. You know, the cherry picker couldn't get out because of the snow, which was a bit of a shock in April. But we had another go, and this is the first place we put them up, which is Ysgol Owen Edwards, Llanuwchllyn. And you can see the Swift boxes up here on the gable end of the.
Sorry, Ben, are you sharing your screen? Because I can't see anything.
Oh,
anyone else can.
That's not very helpful, is it? I thought I was, but has it gone off?
Yeah, I can't see anything. I don't know if I assume it's the same for everybody else.
I do apologise. How is that? Is that?
Yeah, yeah, that's good.
Oh right, I was just merrily going away there.
Okay, we're good.
Sorry, Pobble. I didn't realise that was what was happening there. Okay. Yeah, people who know me know I'm not exactly the most tech wizard kind of person. But anyway, right. I will carry on. I'm just talking about. Did you hear what I was saying, Charlotte? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, we could hear you. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So yeah, this is Ysgol Llanuwchllyn. These are the boxes. I think I've got a bit more of a close-up. Yeah, there's a sort of cherry picker eye view. So it's a brilliant site, nice and high, got a bit of an overhang. We decided to use these Model 30 boxes, which are a kind of handy box for slightly exposed sites. They've got a UPVC roof, so they're a bit weatherproof, and they don't get as hot as a regular wood-only box. So they're quite handy for places like this where they're going to get some sun during the day. And we also, I think I put a picture in. Yes, we also, while we were at it, the project for the National Park is also trying to help swallows and house martins. So we thought we'd put some house martin cups right up in the apex. There are some house martins around the school, and I'm really interested to find out more about the relationship between swifts and house martins, because it seems from my observations that in some places that they, that house martins being on a site seems to be of interest to swifts, if I could put it that way. I've seen sometimes individual swifts prospecting places where I've not known swifts to be, but where house martins are, as if to suggest that the house martins may kind of, rouse their interest in a site. So that's another good reason to try and help both species if possible, where we can put up boxes for both, or nest cups in this case for the house martins. This is a different kind of box that we also put on the school. I had hoped to put a speaker in this one to try and play the calls, but in the end we couldn't sort that out on the day, which was a bit frustrating, but it's the way it goes. And this is a very nice, simple box that is so simple even I could make it. So I made this one myself. It's a roofless box, so it only works if you've got a nice horizontal soffit to sort of snug it up under, if you see what I mean. So the soffit takes the place of the roof, and it's also got a hole which you enter at the bottom rather than at the side of the box. And in a way, that's probably closer, if you think about it, that's probably closer to the kind of holes that a lot of swifts use anyway, which is cracks, in between the eaves and the wall. So, hopefully it might be attractive to swifts, but we'll see. And part of what our work, and I'm sure, a lot of other people who work on swifts are the same, is about is kind of trying to work out what's the best designs of box, where's the best place to put them, and all this kind of stuff. And you can go for hours and years thinking, trying to think how a Swift thinks, and of course we don't really know what the decision-making process is, but it's interesting to gather more data. And as we get more information on where Swifts are using boxes, we can use that to inform, what we do in the future. But this is one that I'm hoping is going to be successful, because it's nice and easy to make, and we could do it with volunteers, and you don't need a lot of specialized machinery to work that out. This is one of the other sites in Llanuwchllyn. It's actually a photo from David, Diolch David, and he's actually put a nice arrow on the picture to show where exactly the Swifts were nesting, and then he's entered it on the Cofnod special page. I'll talk more about that in a bit. But we also, because we knew there were Swifts nesting here, we thought it would be good to get boxes up on the Ysgoldy in Llanuwchllyn, which is also opposite the village hall where they nest as well. So being so close to an existing colony, we thought good to try and get some up, and also nice to get them up on a public building where people are going to see Swifts if they do move in, and you can engage with kids and congregations and community, and there's all that sort of possibility as well. So good to get some boxes up there. We also gave some boxes out, or put some boxes up to local residents who are interested. This is one on Station Road, which is opposite a really good Swift colony, according to David. So we got a double box up here. It's a slightly different design, but it's also one that has no roof and goes straight up onto the underneath of the soffit. There's a drawing of that box, or a single version. We had the double, and we're hoping that Swifts may be able to move in there. The family was very interested. The kids were all excited to hear about that, so fingers crossed for that one. And while we were at it, we also did some stuff to try and help swallows around that area. These are some newly kind of designed swallow alcoves, which we're trialing. They've been designed by Richard Birch, who's an ecologist who lives in Anglesey, but he's come up with this design for swallow alcoves, which you can stick on the outside of a building. Obviously, swallows usually nest inside a barn, but this one is designed to be put on the outside, and it's in cases where there might be an issue with swallows being made homeless by somebody knocking down a shed or doing it up, or a barn. This might, if this is successful, this might be one option for mitigating that and putting something on the outside of the building. Obviously, the best is if they don't get disturbed at all, but if in the case of a loss of a site, then this might be a possible way of helping it. And it's also got a little shelf to collect droppings, because sometimes people complain about making lots of mess underneath the nest. The swallows and house mothers do make more of a mess than Swifts, it has to be said. Not that I think that's any reason not to have them, but anyway. Right, I'm going to move on to, this is Craig Meyer in Meyer Bridge. And one of the things we wanted to do early on in the season this year, because we knew that we had Swifts in boxes at this site, was to try and get a Nest camera into one of the boxes, which sounds like a brilliant idea, because it would be nice to, just share the images with people, but also perhaps do a bit of study and find out a bit more about how Swifts are provisioning chicks and what their sort of daily patterns are and when they come and go and all the rest of it. Sounded like it would be a really good thing to do. So we managed to get funding through our Anglesey SDF project. This is in Meyer Bridge, by the way. And we bought some Nest cameras. And we, with the help of Alan Griffiths, a local construction company who had kindly volunteered their cherry picker for the day, we got up and we put the Nest camera in. Here is one of the guys from Griffiths putting in the Nest camera into an existing Nest box. The boxes have been up since, well, these ones have been up for 2-3 years, some of the boxes on this site have been up for 6 or 7 years now, and it's probably our most successful site in terms of occupancy. So we were fairly confident we'd be able to get Swifts in this box, and we thought, get the camera in, Swifts in, that'll be all good. While he was there, he did actually, sorry, this is a bit of a grim photo, but we did find the remains of one of the Swifts from last year, which is sad to see, to think that it's died there, but in a way it did prove that that they did try and nest in that box last year, which we hadn't actually confirmed. We'd seen action around the box, but this kind of did confirm that there was a nesting attempt. And we don't know exactly why this Swift died in the box. It's hard to say. It could be it was just malnourished, or it could be a result of a fight. Apparently they do have quite vicious battles sometimes, which can, in some cases I've heard, be fatal, but we don't really know. Anyway, we got that one up, and we also put on an external trail cam on the outside of it, on one of the drain pipes, to try and monitor birds coming in and out of the box. The unfortunate thing about this was that we couldn't get the Wi-Fi to join up with the Nest Cam. And this isn't just me not being techie. We tried lots of different ways to do this and got people involved who really do know their stuff, and they struggled. And it was basically, in the end, we had to give up on this idea for this season anyway. We're going to try again next season and get it all set up before we put the boxes in. But by the time the Swift season was kind of coming on, this was in beginning of May by this point, and so we were getting close to the point where the Swifts would want to be in the box, by which time we don't want to disturb them. So in the end, we had to give up on the idea of the Nest Cam anyway. The Trail Cam may have produced some images. We will retrieve it and find out soon, but unfortunately we didn't get any nice footage this year for the Nest Cam, but next time hopefully. So a few other bits and bobs we've done. This is in Holyhead, where we had arranged we're working with North Wales Housing Association on a new build estate there in Holyhead called Canada Gardens, and we got 8 boxes put up, and I arranged to have a speaker put in and connected to a timer that we could switch on at the beginning of the season, playing the sounds. So that has had sounds playing this season. So hopefully that will have attracted us really close to an existing Swift colony in Holyhead as well. So I'm hopeful that might, start to generate some interest. These are a slightly different design of box. Again, I think these are the Filcris. I think they're made from recycled plastic, but they look really good, I think, on this building. It kind of goes with the new white kind of look of the building, but they should do the job hopefully and be there for a good long time. We also try and make use of sort of temporary opportunities to install boxes, and this is my colleague Caroline's house in Vallion. She said she was interested in getting some boxes up, and she had to get some scaffold. She had to get work done on the house anyway, so we thought we'd use that opportunity to put boxes in and get a sound system in as well. So that hopefully will be generating interest perhaps in Valley. I'm not sure whether there's definitely Swifts nesting in Valley. I've got a feeling there are, because I have seen them around, but we've never nailed down exactly where. If you have any info on that, please let us know. But there's a possibility that they will be at least near enough to be sometimes within hearing of this and probably come and check it out. And my other colleague Henry Cook has been doing some fantastic work with the Wrexham Industrial Estate, and he's been arranging to get these Swift terraces or Swift multiple nest boxes put in on industrial units in the Wrexham Industrial Estate, and they're these quite sort of futuristic looking Swift boxes made out of fiberglass. They've got this kind of strange sci-fi kind of toilet look or bathroom kind of chic about them, which I quite like myself, and they seem to go anyway with a kind of very industrial building, but they are potentially a good option if we could get these out on every industrial unit in North Wales. Wouldn't that be amazing? You know, because why not? People aren't going to mind them being there. It's not the sort of place where they're going to spoil the aesthetic, and they could, you know, provide long-term, provide really good opportunities for Swift. So let's see what happens with that. But it's great that they've found a way of putting them up on these buildings, and we hope to do more of that. So we've been working with various people over the year and getting to know people who can help us. You know, I've mentioned a few already, but others have been people like Vet's Sheds in Bethesda who have offered to make some boxes for us. So I'm going to be getting back to them now in the autumn and winter and trying to sort of negotiate for, you know, different designs of boxes that they can make. They've got a wonderful sort of kit there and very knowledgeable volunteers, so they're able to produce different kinds of boxes. So we'll be talking to them. And, you know, apart from all that, I've also just been doing my own local patch monitoring of boxes in Rachib. So this is just all basically views from my garden. This is my neighbour's house, and we have some nest boxes up there. They're model 30s, like the ones on the Llanelchlyn school. But so far they've all been used, but not by swifts, by sparrows. You can see a sparrow in there. This is sort of early in the year, in April or May. And other boxes that we've seen in different places, this is one in Bethesda, have also been used by starlings. This is if you have a slightly bigger nest hole entrance, then starlings will quite happily get in. And that, I put this slide in because one of the things that's emerged from studies throughout UK and elsewhere is that if you are wanting to provide opportunities for synanthropic species, what they call synanthropic species, meaning birds that use buildings, basically, including starlings, house sparrows, and others, swift boxes are actually a very good way of doing that. And there's even evidence to suggest that sparrows in particular seem to prefer swift boxes I'll get this right. Sparrows prefer swift boxes to sparrow boxes, basically. So we've been trying to get that message out to ecologists, because sometimes ecologists and county biodiversity officers are required to send advice to people to try and increase the biodiversity. And often they'll say, well, you know, put up some sparrow terraces because sparrows are in trouble and need help. But if we can tweak that advice to say, put up some swift boxes because sparrows may use them, but swifts can also use them. And swifts are, you know, really, in Wales anyway, in more trouble than sparrows, then that will be a good sort of outcome. And that's kind of quite a lot of what we have been trying to do with the Wildlife Trust more recent years, is kind of consult with ecologists. We've had training workshops where we've tried to get people really clued up on swifts, what to look for, how to identify sites, what kind of boxes to propose for planning applications, and all this kind of thing. But also just sort of, you know, advising in individual cases and trying to share the knowledge about swifts and try to help get them protected where they might be in danger. Existing sites might be endangered, or, you know, try and identify places where it would be good to get swift boxes put in, either as new builds or as part of planning or, you know, work done or whatever. So it's all part of it and it all helps. But yeah, this is just to show that there's other species using the boxes. And this is an example of a different kind of box. These are swift bricks. And this is something we've been trying to do more of a lot lately. So this is in Colwyn Bay, and it's part of a regeneration project undertaken by Capita Construction on behalf of the Cyngor Conwy. And the Capita Construction, after, I have to say, some sort of poking from the biodiversity officer, Barbara Oshanka, who is an absolutely brilliant advocate for swifts. She's just retired, but she was very proactive in making sure that the the opportunity to put Swift bricks into this site was taken because we'd already identified a nearby site as being an active Swift colony, and Barbara stepped in and made sure that the development was going to include Swift bricks. So we were happy to go and advise. We did a site visit with them earlier in the year, and then we were able to go back later and monitor as well. And you know, once they'd been given that poke from Barbara, Capita are actually really good. Not all construction companies and developers are as forthcoming as that, it has to be said. We've had problems this year with a site in St Asaph, which is the old HM Stanley Hospital site, which has been developed for housing, but the company there, Pure Construction, haven't so far anyway, it seems, really done what they're supposed to do, which is put the Swift bricks in, or Swift boxes in, and it's been hard to try to sort of make that happen, you know. And there's a limit to what we can do ourselves, but we try and help and try and sort of join forces with local people who care about this and who want to try and make things better. But it's sometimes dependent to some extent on how willing the individual companies are to do the right thing. But this is a great example. These are Swift bricks, so they're internal Swift boxes. All you see from the outside is this actual entrance hole, and you can render right around the hole, so that they're very discreet, and they're also really similar to what Swift use already. So for lots of reasons, obviously much more sustainable, because they're not going to kind of rot or need replacing or anything. They're basically part of the building. So for lots of reasons, they're a really good option. They're you can see quite high up on close to the roof line of the houses. So this is a great option. And this is in May now. This is the start of the season. We went and did a little survey to try and work out where the Swifts might be nesting close to this regeneration project. This is Emily, one of the Youth Forum volunteers, helping me to try and identify some spots. There were a few of us there that night. It was still a bit cold, you know, the weather didn't really warm up, if you remember, till, well, I think the end of May, really, if not June. It was still pretty cool. So the Swifts weren't exactly putting on a show for us that night, but we did see a couple and managed to identify one site where Swifts were going in. And then we went back to do a kind of site inspection in June, up on when the scaffolding was already up on these buildings, to try and make sure that there weren't any sites where Swifts, you know, their nest sites might be disturbed. So that was handy to be able to go up and see, you know, this is a kind of Swift's eye view of Colwyn Bay, if you like. And while I was up there, I actually did see some going into buildings opposite, where I kind of had suspected they might be nesting already. That was the arrow shows where I saw one going in, and that's a kind of classic site where you've got a little bit of, if you see the close-up, you see a little bit of a hole, a little bit of a cavity, and that's enough for the Swifts to get in, and that's what they like, a nice bit of not too well maintained building, really. That's kind of their classic nest site. But then opposite, we're putting in the Swift bricks, so I'm hoping, you know, that will be close enough for them to be able to take advantage. This one is one that's been set back into the insulation cladding, so you can get different styles of these S bricks designed by Dick Newell, and they can go with, depending on what surface you have and what depth you have on the wall, they will fit into that, and at the end of it, they look really nice and flush, so they're a good option. Here's another one where you should just be able to see at the top here some Swift bricks that were put into a new build. This is again thanks to Barbara Oshanka for suggesting this, but you know, the more of this that's happening over North Wales, the better, and it is starting to happen now. You know, the more and more biodiversity officers are recommending swift provision as part of development. So again, fingers crossed. So then, yeah, things did eventually start to warm up into June, and we started seeing some of the younger birds arriving. Young swifts come back in sort of late June or mid-June, late June, beginning of July. And I started noticing lots of swifts around. And of course, at this point, I still had sparrows in the boxes on the house opposite. But I thought it would be interesting to try and play calls from my window, which is kind of near. It's the nearest I can get. I haven't been able to get a speaker into the box on my neighbour's house yet. But I did manage to do a bit of this, just sort of playing the calls when I was seeing swifts around. And sure enough, they definitely came in. They were definitely interested. These are birds which haven't yet nested. So they're not the adult parents. They're the ones that are kind of first-time buyers, if you like. They come up from Africa, arriving late in the season, but they're looking to establish a pair and also a nest site. So they're actively looking for a new nest site, and they did kind of get interested. They did kind of eventually, at first they were just basically trying to get close to my window, which was where the sound was coming from, but there was not a suitable nest site there, so it was a bit confusing for them. But they did eventually kind of start taking interest in these boxes. They probably saw the sparrows coming in and out and thought, okay, and there's a hole there, and kind of went and had a look and got my hopes up. They got pretty close, and in one case they did actually cling and have a little poke the head in and have a look. But that was as close as it went with these boxes. They had a look inside, and for whatever reason, they thought no. Obviously, it's fascinating. It would be really interesting to know why they choose one place over another, but we don't know. We can only really speculate. But it was interesting to see that, and they were spinning around, sometimes groups of 3 or 4 together, going around, responding to calls, but also coming back in 1s and 2s themselves, which is why I think is more like the kind of purposeful prospecting behavior, rather than just the kind of social screaming party thing. So there's a kind of difference of that in that kind of behavior, really. And occasionally they get quite close. This is about the best photo I've got of swifts in terms of being able to get one in focus. But it's really only when they sort of stop and turn. When they're going at swift speed, there's just no way you can I can't anyway, get a kind of a good image. I know some people have. Gary Eisenhower got a lovely picture from Conwy of some in full flight, but usually it's only when they're doing this, and this is when they're kind of banking, like turning. So they stick the brakes on, fan the tail, fan the wings, and then sort of make themselves as broad as possible so as to kind of slow down or turn round. So it's a sort of uncharacteristic picture of a swift, but at least it is kind of relatively close up and in focus, but not how you normally see a swift, to be honest. And I've put up lots of boxes in Rachib over the years, about 30 or so, and up until now I've not had any swifts in them, although lots of sparrows. This is some more that are just around the corner, and to me, looking at this, I would have thought these would have been more attractive to the swifts because they've got a bit of an overhang over them. They're nice and high, they're away from any windows or anything. So, on the face of it, you'd have thought that would have been more attractive. And in fact, they have found these boxes and had a look. They've been sort of flybys and the odd kind of little bit of prospecting, getting quite close, but again, no actual going into a box. So sort of flirting with this site just a bit further around. So when the calls were playing from my window, there's a kind of circuit that the swifts were doing, and I'm really interested in this and whether this circuit is kind of the key to where they want to be and how far they are from perhaps what was their natal site, as they call it, the place where they themselves were raised and where the other swifts are in the area and things. So it's really interesting, but Again, a lot of speculation. This is another one site just down the street, so converted chapel. And then there's another converted chapel a bit further on with slightly different boxes, but again, only sparrows so far. But then this is kind of fast forwarding a bit into later in the year. This is the site directly opposite our house, Capel Carmel in Rachib. It would be an ideal site. When we went up to try and put boxes there many years ago, I think it was about 6 or at least years ago, I was very frustrated that we couldn't get them where I wanted them, which would be under the soffits here, which would be an ideal site with a bit of an overhang. But the render wasn't strong enough for us we couldn't risk putting a box there because it felt like it wasn't going to be solid. It might fall on someone's head. The only place where it was solid was on the corner. So we put one on the corner just out in the hope that, maybe one day, but it wasn't really where we wanted it. But Swifts did start having a look at this. They always have a look at this building. It seems because it's so nice and high, and this sort of overhang. And this year there'd been a slight hole developed. I don't know how this had happened. I think it has been a leak there. Something had got through, and there was a bit of a hole. And earlier in the year, starlings had been nesting in it. So sure enough, when it came to June, July, the Swifts were having a look at this, especially when there were calls playing. And at one point, they did even go in and have a look at this, saw Swifts disappear into that hole. So they obviously went and had a look at where the starlings had been. Nothing to do with the box at this stage. But there, and at this stage, the sparrows were still in the box. So, this was kind of going on, and you can see here there's a Swift kind of having a look at the box, but the sparrow is still in the box going, "You're not coming in here, mate." So kind of turf wars going on a little bit. But they kept taking interest. And then in July, this is kind of really towards the end of the season, 25th of July, I think, I finally saw this, which is a Swift going into the box. And this was after the sparrows had, for whatever reason, decided to go. I mean, they probably just finished and fledged their chicks and had enough, but the Swifts definitely moved in at this point. And it wasn't just one, it was a pair. And they kept coming in and out, which was very exciting because it sort of suggests that there might be some occupancy next year. This is one on its way out of the box. And there it is coming up again. And that basically carried on then until only about a week or so ago when I saw the last one coming in or out was on the 14th of August. So they were definitely sort of bedded in this site and seem to have established themselves. So what will be really interesting will be to see what happens next year and whether there'll be a bit of a fight between the sparrows and the Swifts, and whether they'll hoik the sparrows out or whether they'll decide to go in the hole nearby. We don't know. We'll find out, I guess. But it was interesting. And because of that, I decided there was some scaffolding on a house just up the street, and I tried to take advantage of opportunities if they arise. And I went and asked the owner, and he said, "Yeah, go on. We'll have a Swift box on ours as well." And that I've got quite hopes for because it's nice and high again, and it's almost opposite the chapel, so it would be on their radar, as it were. So again, possibilities. Okay, so this is going back to. I'm going on a bit, so I'll try and speed up. This is Meyer again. This is the site with the Nest camera in the box. And we did some monitoring with some of the Youth Forum guys, Megan and Tanith, I think, helped me here. And we were seeing lots of action. And in fact, we think there was probably 8 out of the 9, at least, boxes on the building were occupied by Swifts, which is fantastic. And it kind of gives us hope that all this work with boxes is worthwhile, because I had started to wonder with some sites whether we were actually helping Swifts at all. But places like Meyer suggest that if you get it right, they will expand and take advantage of the boxes. So here they are coming in and out, different places. This is the one with the Nest camera in it. If only we had an active Nest camera. There we are. And sometimes we were even able to see an adult Swift sitting in the box and calling from the box. And this is quite an interesting behavior that there's a different call that they do from inside the box, which if you kind of tune your ears in, you can get to identify it. And we also heard chicks calling sometimes from inside the box, calling for food when the adults came in. So, it's kind of exciting stuff. And amazing the speed they go in and out at. It really is just sort of, they actually actively accelerate as they're on their way into the box. Up to 69 miles an hour, they can fly in level flight. It feels like they make full use of that on the way into the box, perhaps so as not to be seen, so as not to give away the nest site, but they absolutely zoom in. You can just hear sometimes this kind of sound, like someone taking a chunk of air out of behind you as they're coming in. And this is the nearby site on Meyer Bridge on Askew Street, where they originally nested in the buildings here on the right, under the eaves. And then, so in July, they have the Swift Awareness Week, which is a UK-wide thing, just to try and get people, aware of some of the issues facing Swifts, and get people sort of switched on to their local patch where Swifts are, and try and get people active as Swift champions. So that was in July this year. So because of that, we decided to do some surveys. Obviously, with COVID, it wasn't quite what we would have done in the past, where we've had Swift halves and had lots of social stuff, but we did what we could, and we had one in Meyer Bridge, which was great. Only a couple of us there, me and Jake Burton, but we managed to get lots of good data, including confirming a site that hadn't been sure where they were nesting. And again, I said 8 out of 9 nest boxes definitely being occupied, which was really encouraging. And interest in a site that we later confirmed. And also got to take lots of pictures because there weren't so many people who was able to do some of that. And really interesting when you take these pictures, because our eyes are too slow really to take stuff in. Sometimes you look back through the photos and the camera's caught stuff that you'd kind of missed. And I think this was one where the Swift is actually sort of taking a scratch in midair. They kind of bring their foot over the top of one wing and scratch behind the ear or whatever. And they are incredibly actually really flexible. There's a study by a guy recently where he's taken videos and photos to show how Swifts preen in the air and how they do all these kind of contortions whilst in mid-flight. But in real time, you wouldn't really pick this stuff up, but photos sometimes pick it up. Swifts diving in on their way in to swoop up to the nest sites, and then in pairs chasing one another. There's quite a lot of this goes on, sort of pairs obviously assessing one another's swiftness, and sometimes quite close flying. Terns do this as well, sort of flying in pairs, going up high, chasing one another, and it seems to be a way of assessing each other as mates. This one was really interesting. This is towards dusk, and I sort of hadn't noticed this in real time, but looking at the photo, it seems to have, it looks like it's got a big long beak sticking out. I don't think it is. I think I speculate that that's a moth, and this was really at dusk time. They're already seeing bats at this point, and I'm wondering whether Swifts do have a little spin around dusk time just to hoover up the odd moth, because obviously a moth must be a pretty good, it's a pretty good source of protein for a Swift. And I wondered whether that might be a moth that he's got there. Oh yeah, and a random balloon, which we also saw in another survey, which was, interesting, but perhaps depressing in terms of plastic. We also did one in Llanberis, which is another Swift hotspot next to a lake, obviously, Llynpadan. Probably good for bugs and probably helps, and lots of nice stone Victorian buildings. And we also made some good contacts with people. Rob and I were walking around and met a couple of people who we were able to talk to about possibilities for us getting boxes up, which was really good. And it's great when you can kind of generate that local interest and get people interested, potential Swift champions for the future, or at least hosts for Swift boxes as well. this is the high street, so birds kind of come in from the left from the lake and zoom up into the nest sites under the eaves of the houses. And we have got some boxes there, but so far they're using natural sites. And this house was amazing. It's quite a small little terraced house on the high street, but we reckon there was at least 6, I think, Rob, in the end we identified at least 6, different places where swifts were going in on this house, which is amazing, really. So, very, very productive spot. Bangor survey organised by the Youth Forum, which was great, in the middle of Bangor. And we confirmed at least 3, possibly 4 or 5 nests at the independent school, which used to be the museum in Bangor, and also suspected at another site at St Mary's. Here's Megan and Jake helping out, looking for the swifts with me at the St Mary's site. This is the building that we're looking at. It's going to be developed into a youth theatre, so we're hoping that we'll be able to work with them. But we've got 2 boxes up there already, and we suspect that they might be being used. I heard some calls which sounded as if they were coming from inside the building. We weren't able to identify exactly where they were coming from, but we suspect that there is breeding there. So it's quite exciting. I have to try and we're also in touch with the architects of the new, because they're going to develop the building. We're in touch with them about the best way to put either bricks or boxes up more for swifts as in the new build bit. And this is nearby on the Dean Street University buildings. Didn't get a very good welcome from the seagulls there. They were very narky because they had young chicks around at the time, so they were kind of glaring down at me, making a lot of noise. Here's Megan and Jake at the school, where we were able to identify the swifts going in under the eaves as it was getting dark. Quite challenging because they go at such a speed. And then Bethesda, again, it was about, I think there was 4 of us, and we managed to confirm, a good number of nests, and heard some chicks and possible interest in a few sites. So it's a great place. Some of the sites at Bethesda are great places to see swifts, because you've got the kind of, because of the slope of the town, you're able to see a lot of sky or a lot of mountain, and you can kind of see the birds zooming about in the screaming parties. You can see one of these birds has got its mouth open, screaming. I think these are the ones near to Capel Bethania. And this is a site where they're going in under the eaves. If you were looking at it, you wouldn't think it would be a good place for swifts. Not particularly high, and it's quite awkward to get into, but it must be a traditional site. Amazing the shapes that swifts make when you see, they're kind of so streamlined and so extreme in a way, so missile-like, or they look so sort of sheer and abstract. And this is a site we hope might be getting used at one point, because we've got some boxes up, and it would be it's nice and high, and it's close to existing colonies, so fingers crossed. And this is Ken Weiss, which has been very well watched by Pam and Jeremy, who live nearby, and they are great sort of swift champions in Bethesda, not only for the observations, but also for sort of making suggestions about involvement with community projects and things, which is always good. And Ken Weiss is a site where, this is one of Pam's pictures actually, so they were able to sort of keep an eye on the birds using it through the year, but they're also able to put me in touch with people who are going to be developing the site as a community centre, and so we were able to talk to them about possibilities for more boxes, or maybe even a nest cam or something like that. So lots of good opportunities there. We are wheeling around the site, and okay, so now this is the same box that we saw earlier. If I fast forward, this is the same box that we saw earlier in the year was being used by the starling. and they're very territorial starling as well. Wouldn't let anything near it. But if you fast forward a couple of weeks and the starlings are happy to leave it, it's kind of like a timeshare basically. The swifts seem to move in, and there was definitely swifts in there when we were doing the survey, able to see them and hear them inside the box, and it seems that they were using that box after the starlings had quit, as well as a couple of other natural sites on the building. This is I think that's Ruth doing the survey at Kevin Weiss as it's getting dark. You know, it gets quite dark when they finally start coming in for the night. This was an interesting picture. I don't know if you can see this, but the head of this swift is sort of slightly bulgy, and underneath there, that's because this is a parent swift, and it's actually got a full throat sac. They have this throat pouch which they can fill up with insects, up to 1,000 insects apparently, or spiders or whatever, invertebrates, so that they can bring it in one big lump to feed to the chicks. So, you know, if you really train your eyes, you might pick that out in real time, but certainly with a photo, it helps. You can zoom in and, oh yeah, that's a parent bird. So, you know, this kind of stuff could be interesting to be able to sort of say whether it's a young'un or an adult. This is definitely a parent with a full bolus, as they call it, a food ball ready to be put into a lucky chick. And then finally, at the end of this week, we did a Holyhead Swift walk with Caroline in Holyhead, and this had lots of people. And I tried to not take it too personally that it was just because Caroline was organising it. I think it was also because it was called a walk rather than a survey. Sounds more fun, perhaps. So I should bear that in mind for future things. But it was great. There were lots of people, and it was a lovely evening as well. And we got lots of good data, but also nice swift show. There were like 35 birds overhead at one point, and lots of people interested. And you know, it was a really nice evening. This is at the marine port where we've had, well, the guys from Stena have put up boxes off their own bat, really, with help from us, and they are being used. Recently had it confirmed that I think 8 of the boxes there are being used by swifts, which is fantastic again. This is at the Gwynedd shipping site, yeah, just across the town, going towards the evening. As it got dark, we had a bonus viewing of an urban badger in the back of someone's garden as we were just winding up the swifts. The badger shift started, which was kind of interesting. And then this is just sort of an example. What I've been seeing more is just swift boxes going up that we hadn't known about, which is great. And basically, this must be, you know, there was work going on this school in Bethesda, but it would have been recommended as part of planning that there's some swift boxes were put up. I don't know if you can see them here. These are these Habi Sabi boxes, again, a different design, but great to see them up. And, you know, nothing to do with us, but so much the better. You know, this is just happening as part of planning, which is fantastic. And, you know, let's hope that they do get used, and that people, especially on schools, I think it's such a great thing if they can get used. There's a few more boxes around, just in my patch, on the leisure centre in Bethesda, BT Exchange, just doing some monitoring of all these different sites over the summer. It was a really nice thing to do of an evening, talking to people. This is on Pen y Bryn, where a lady has agreed to try and help swifts, even though she doesn't particularly like birds herself, but she didn't want her swifts that are in her house to be made homeless. She's got to do some work on the house. So she's talked to us about how we can try and get some boxes up as part of the, you know, whilst the work is going on. So that was a good connection to make. And then this is a really promising one. Somebody was able to confirm for us, this is a site that we suspected might be being used in Meyer Bridge, but it was confirmed by a friend who saw them, or Steve Roberts was able to tell me that he'd seen the swifts going into one of these boxes up under the eaves here. And that's brilliant because it's a school, and therefore there's brilliant possibilities for engagement with kids. And then we've got a few more boxes around the corner as well. So very encouraging, and let's hope that maybe happens at other sites as well. So these are all more swift screaming parties. There's one going towards evening time, and like I say, it kind of, they do go really late into the evening and obviously overlap with bats. You know, it's that time of day. This is a site in Rachib that's being used by swifts, sparrows, starlings, and jackdaws. They all use that building. It's kind of amazing that there is home to all those species, and you know, there must be lots of kind of, well, interactions, shall we say, between those different species, but they do seem to be using it, and that's the sort of main site in my village for swifts. There's some more places around Bethesda. That's the Capel where they nest on both sides of the building, and this is another example in Capel Cirig where swifts nest on both sides of this building. This is the Plaza Brennan, the mountain centre, and they were going in this side under the eaves, but also on the other side. And this answers a question that somebody asked me today, which was whether swifts ever go close to a window. Well, they obviously do. This is one going right in, quite close to a window. And you wouldn't normally get photos of this, but I think this was a young one that was trying to get into a site that was already occupied. So he sort of got this far, but then couldn't go in all the way because there was something inside. There was another one inside that was, you know, not wanting him to come in. That's why I was able to get the photo, because normally they're, you know, too quick. And we've got some of the impeccable, the fiberglass boxes up there at Plaza Brennan as well. So waiting to see if they get used. And this is an inquiry that came in this week actually, and I hope I don't know if Sue is joining us tonight, but I hope she doesn't mind me using it as an example. This is a view of her neighbour's house where swifts do nest in the gable end and the eaves, and she's wondering about whether to try and get boxes up on her house, which is the one opposite. And so we got, you know, there's always lots of issues to do with this when you're thinking about swift boxes. Is it high enough? Can you get at it, for starters? You know, could you get a cherry picker or scaffold in there? Or other things to think about as which way it's facing. If it's facing into into a lot of sunlight during the day, is that an appropriate site? Has it got much of an overhang on the roof? All these kinds of things are worth bearing in mind. But I think we'd still like to try and get some boxes up, you know, on the house. It's a question of which kind of box and how we do it. But you know, a lot of the work that we do with the trust is that kind of advising people on individual cases where, you know, they want to get boxes up, but we can try to help them think through the different issues and the different options. This is a place where there was house martins. We didn't know about swifts. It's in Treather Bay. We didn't know about swifts beforehand, but we just noticed, I just spotted a swift having a prospect around this site. And again, it makes me think, are house martins a kind of magnet for swifts, you know? Do they just sort of see a bunch of house martins and think, okay, that might be worth looking at? I don't know. It's again, we need more information. Oops, sorry, going a bit too fast there. I will speed up, I think, at this point, because we want to leave room for other people's conversation and questions. This is just to put this in because it was interesting seeing a swift mobbing a buzzard. You can see the swift there right at the end of the buzzard. There's not many things that would, you know, mess with a raptor in the air, but I think swifts are so maneuverable and so fast that they've just got nothing to worry about with something as big and unwieldy as a buzzard. You know, maybe if it was a hobby or a peregrine, they might not be quite as cheeky, but this swift was definitely felt quite free to go and, you know, peck the tail basically of this buzzard, which was, it was kind of interesting to see. And again, things I hadn't seen before, I just noticed this year with taking photos. This is a swift flying upside down. So if anyone tells you it's only sort of ravens and hen harriers that do that, then there's evidence that swifts can flip over if they want to. And in fact, the more you watch swifts, the more you realize they just live in 3 dimensions in a way that we can only kind of, well, we can't really imagine. You know, they just inhabit the air in a completely different way, and they use their speed and their agility to just sort of put themselves into a different part of the sky if they want to. And you realize that when you try and photograph them, that it's it's just really difficult because they're so fast, and they turn so quickly, and they just have complete mastery of the sky. This is a quick story about a swift that was picked up by someone in Bontnewydd last year, and they managed to release it, and it flew off in the end okay. But you do hear about swifts. This is a young one, you can tell from the pale forehead. You do hear about, especially young swifts, sort of towards the end of the season, either falling out prematurely or, you know, coming onto the ground where they don't really want to be on the ground. And there is a kind of correct procedure for that, which we try and help people to realize. I've been in touch with someone today actually who's trying to find out if there's anybody in North Wales who is a specialized swift carer, because they're actually quite hard to look after. If there is an injured one or one that needs to be rehabilitated, they're not as easy as other birds to look after. So we'll be looking into possibly trying to get someone trained up to do that, to be a swift specialized carer, because there's a bit of a gap in our area, and we've had to direct people over to an RSPCA centre in Northwich, which is the nearest one for us. But this was a little one that turned up in Bontnewydd, and happy ending, it managed to fly away okay. So just to end, these are pictures that people have sent in to Cofnod, telling us about swift sites and indicating exactly where the entry point or exit point was. And this is brilliant. This kind of information is really useful for Cofnod and for informing planning decisions and stuff. And this is the special page of Swift Recovery, and it's designed to be able to allow you to fill in. You can find your exact location of your sighting on the map, even down to the level of a house. You could sort of identify it on that, and then you just click on the bit where it says behavior, and then you can choose. I might tweak the wording of this, but basically it's to sort of give an indication of how sure you are that they're actually nesting there, and that kind of information is really, really important. And we've now got over 1,500 records more than on the database of Swift Recovery, which is fantastic. And even this year alone, we've had like over 60 sites where breeding was proven in North Wales recorded, which is really, really good and really useful, and it will all help to inform their conservation, we hope. So thank you to everybody that's doing that. And if you haven't put in, some swift sightings that you've made over the year, please get on Swift Recovery on Cofnod. If you haven't used Cofnod before, it's a really useful tool for ecology, local record centre, and we've got a special page on there which is designed just for this. So I just encourage you to use it. And one last mention of two books that were published this year that might be of interest. Swifts and Us is a book by Sarah Gibson, who works for Shropshire Wildlife Trust, actually. But it's all about the kind of different conservation work that people are doing for swifts around the UK, and some of the more recent bits of research and innovations in swift protection and conservation. So that's a really, really nice book. And Birds of Wales is a absolute doorstop. It's got all the information that you could, well, a lot of the most up-to-date information on all the different species, all the species accounts for all the birds that are recorded in Wales. I was asked to do the species account for swifts, so there is stuff on swifts there, although even since publication I've sort of thought, actually, that information is, it always feels like a bit of a work in progress, and some of that information I would even want to edit now and update again, and it's always sort of ongoing, isn't it, how we understand things. But it's what we had at the time, so that's there. And I think I will just end my bit now, and perhaps throw it open to people to share some of their stuff, or to ask questions or whatever. I don't mind, but yeah, I'll stop talking now. over to you, Charlotte, I guess, or whoever would like to sort of jump in at this point.
Anyone got any questions? Thank you, Ben. That was amazing. Pam, have you got a question? You're muted.
You need to unmute yourself. Yeah.
There we are. Okay. Just following up, you were talking about house martins and swifts, and the one thing I remember from Plaza Brennan was the vast numbers of house martins that nest there. Actually, at the time that I worked there, I was not aware of swifts because I was there in the day, so they, I wouldn't have seen them. But they have massive numbers of house martins there. Yeah. And also just to say about the late bird that I saw going up under the eaves at Capel Curig, just above Joe Brown's shop entrance, which I saw last Friday week.
On the main road, not Joe Brown's around the corner.
No, the one on the main road. I think it's moved now, hasn't it? Anyway, the shop right at the junction at Capel.
Yeah, it felt like it was a relatively late year this year. I mean, I think perhaps that early spring, I mean that late spring, very cold spring, affected things. I know it affected other birds because things like wheatears they had a really hard time of it this year and kind of gave up certainly on their first brood. I think the ones around here seemed to just give up on trying to find food. It was so cold in May that there wasn't, things like spotted flycatchers and wood warblers just weren't around at times when they'd normally be around. So I'm sure that had a knock-on effect, even though there was good weather in around June and July. Yeah. They perhaps caught up a bit, but it was probably still a fairly, it wasn't an early finishing season, I don't think, this year.
That was all.
Anyone else?
We've had a question from, two questions in the chat. One from Jake, who says, any word on if we can get into the grounds of St Mary's in Bangor next year to try and verify the suspected nest and maybe a bat survey too?
Yes. Well, we've been in touch with the people at Nith. Nith is run by Cwmni Franwen, which is a theatre company, like I said, and we were in touch with them earlier in the year, and we even wrote a letter of sort of recommendation for their sort of application for the new work and stuff. So we're hoping to be quite kind of involved with them and to collaborate with them. And yeah, I'm sure as part of that we can negotiate to have access to go in and do surveys, because it's a really awkward site to try and monitor because of all the sort of yew trees. It's a classic churchyard with lots of trees around it, and it's quite hard to get at unless you're in there. So yeah, I'm sure we'll be able to arrange that. Yeah. David, I saw a hand up.
Yeah, hi Ben, thanks ever so much for the talk tonight, and just highlighting all the fantastic work going on for swifts in North Wales. Just wanted to emphasise the point really of biological recording. There's two buildings in Trawsfynydd that I recorded swifts nesting on, all dilapidated buildings that had seen better days and were a bit neglected. Managed to record nesting swifts on them, and then within 12 months the properties had changed hands. Planning applications had come in. The protected species surveys that accompanied the planning applications, they didn't make any reference to swifts. They were mostly concentrated on bats, didn't mention anything about swifts. But luckily, because the records were in Cobnod, Caroline, my planning colleague, was able to, she was basically aware that there were swifts in the building as a result of the Cobnod records, and was able to negotiate quite good mitigation on at least one of the buildings. So I think the owner was happy to put up 4 or 5 boxes. So yeah, just the importance really of good quality recording, 10-figure grid references if possible. So, and especially if you see old buildings that look like they might be ready for development or changing hands, then maybe prioritize those if you're pushed for time.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, brilliant. That's the kind of knowledge that you need, isn't it? And it's good to know that process is working, that you guys are able to access the information and then make the recommendations as a result of it. It's really good. yeah, the more of that we can do, the better, I think.
Yeah.
And like you say, you know, getting more people to know about it. We did wonder, you know, there was somebody who made a suggestion that we could get a Swift plaque, because the issue you mentioned where a house changes hands and then people may not know that there are Swifts there. Somebody was suggesting we could get a Swift plaque that you could put onto a building and sort of screw it into the building to say, you know, Swift's nest here, just something simple like that. But that it would be a way of drawing attention, but also hopefully sort of making it be seen as a positive thing, that, you know, aren't you lucky that you've got Swifts nesting in your house because they're amazing birds and so on. You know, I think it's a nice idea. We haven't pursued it as a thing yet, but perhaps that could be something we could look into.
Yeah, no, it sounds really good. And just before I forget, one of those buildings, the Swifts, they weren't underneath the roof line, they weren't underneath the soffits, they were about 2/3 up the building, where a piece of mortar had fallen out between two big stones, and had another building in Porthmadog this summer where they were maybe 2/3 of the way up the building. So
yeah, it's not always at the roof line, is it?
No.
That's the same in the Gwynedd shipping site in Holyhead. They're just going into like gaps that are in a blind wall, basically. They're just sort of halfway up, like you say. So you're right. You shouldn't assume that they are in just cavities under eaves. It could be anywhere really, and it shows. I mean, although they're quite traditional and quite, you could say, quite conservative in terms of they stick to what they know. But you know, they must over time have evolved to be quite adaptable. Otherwise, obviously, they wouldn't be in buildings in the first place. So you know, you've got to assume that they will find places you know, how they find them, I don't know, because when you see them going at speed around, you know, in the screaming parties at 60 miles an hour, how they pick out the holes that are like hidden from you know, I just don't know, but they do find them. They do find them eventually, yeah.
There's one in Conwy like that in the big chapel where it's about 3 feet below the eaves, below the gutter, and it just goes straight into there must be a gap in between they're big slate blocks, and they found a gap and it just goes in there. Brilliant.
Yeah, I mean the hole that they need is pretty small. It's not quite as small as a bat, but it's like, you know, 28 millimeters by 60 millimeters is big enough for them to get into. So you know, that's quite a small hole really.
We've got another question on the chat, Ben, from Amber. She says, is it possible to get Swift boxes installed on any house, or must it be on a house where known Swift colonies reside?
Well, I would say no, it doesn't have to be where there are Swifts already. I'd say it's worth putting one up anyway, you know, even if Swifts don't use it, sparrows might use it, but also, you know, Swifts do find new sites, you know, that's like just what I was just saying, otherwise they wouldn't have colonized everywhere. So, and especially if you are putting up boxes, if you can think about getting a sound system put in at the same time, that is a really good way of like advertising the fact that you've got those new sites for Swifts, and that can accelerate them moving in. So if you can do that as well, even better. There are kits available for, you know, not that much. I think they can go for about less than 50 quid. I think they did some for like 30 quid for a whole. Oh, just sparrowhawks just come into the garden. Sorry, distraction. You can get them for about 30 quid, so that's worth thinking about. And I would say just go for it. You know, if you have the ability to put the boxes up, and it's a suitable building, then I'd say go for it, regardless of whether there are known Swifts in your area or not, because they move around as well. You know, the Swifts are moving around widely. You know, they have a huge kind of daily range, so they may well just be in your neighborhood and be able to see your boxes. So why not?
Brilliant.
I'd just say, Ben, thanks so much for the talk. I'm going to have to scoot, mate.
Oh, Dave, that sounds like Dave's voice.
Really
Oh.
interesting stuff anyway, a lot of good stuff going on.
Oh, there he is. Great. Oh, good to see you, Dave.
I mean, in our local area, we've certainly seen, whether it's since putting the box up, but we've had some lovely screaming parties, certainly this summer, over the Dizzle area, of up to now, so, 8 or 9 birds.
Brilliant.
And we haven't seen for donkey's years, so it's difficult to monitor the boxes, without sort of standing there staring them for a hell of a long time. So we've no evidence that there are any swifts have taken up I think we put something like 25 up around the village. But something's made a difference anyway, and there are a lot more swifts about here, so that's great news.
That's very encouraging. That's great stuff. Yeah.
So anyway, thanks so much indeed. I'm gonna fly. Okay.
Brilliant. Thanks, Dave, and thanks for all the work you've done for us over the years as well. Brilliant.
Okay, no worries. Bye. Bye.
Cheers. Yeah.
Any more questions from anyone?
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
New webcam, don't even know if it works. What you're doing sounds absolutely amazing. It's so inspirational because this is the first year I've trying to do any sort of Swift community work. I live in Chirk, so I'm kind of on the border, but I'll show you what we've got this year. Don't know how well you're going to be able to see it, but I don't know how to share my screen. So that is one arch on the aqueduct. And that's 12 confirmed nests on one arch. If you can see that, okay. Sorry if you can't. And we've got at least 25 across the whole structure. I work for Canal and River Trust, so I'm trying to raise awareness in-house, but also in the town. And so far, it's gone really well. But our new ecologist didn't even know sort of where we were. So trying to get our local and our senior ecologists involved. So that's what I've been trying to do, but it's great to know how much you've been doing because I've written down what you do, swift walks, that sort of thing, because there's nothing where I am. There's quite a lot in the houses, but when you find them in people's houses, do you approach the residents?
That's a good question. And I don't have a hard and fast rule for that. If there's a threat, if there's an issue with work being done on the house that would threaten the swifts, then I would definitely go in and say, look, did you know about the swifts and how do you feel about them, and would you consider trying to protect them or put up boxes, etc., etc. Definitely. But in some cases, I mean, I've over the years I have had 1 or 2 cases where I've talked to somebody about swifts and they've been actively sort of like, no, we don't want the swifts and we're going to get rid of them, which is disappointing. But overall, nearly everybody is pretty, most people are pretty positive. So it's generally worth raising it and hoping that they are sort of going to be sympathetic. And yeah, I mean, the issue Dave was saying there is obviously sometimes you're staring up at somebody's house come evening time, and you're looking at the upstairs windows. It could be taken in the wrong way. So sometimes it's good to sort of just make it official and say to somebody, look, I'm interested in swifts. There are these birds that nest in houses. I don't know if you've seen them around. There's ways of doing it that sort of put people's minds at rest. But sometimes they'll just see you looking there and looking earnest and birdwatchery, and might just ask you what you're doing, and then you've got the conversation. But I don't have a kind of hard and fast rule, but I would definitely take any opportunity to try and raise awareness. And even if it's neighbours, they'll be seeing the swifts. If it's not their house, they'll be seeing the swifts around, so you can talk to them. If you see anybody out on the street, it's worth sort of just engaging them and saying, have you noticed these swifts? And we've got leaflets that we had printed that were kind of give a basic few facts about swifts and a contact and a kind of overview, and they're quite useful to just like give out as a flyer to people if you're in that situation. And I'm not sure how many of those we've got left, but we could reprint them, and you guys would be welcome to use those and share that if you like. But it's just I think making the initial conversation is the thing, and trying to get people involved locally is what it's all about. And somewhere, from sounds of it, I mean, Chirk Aqueduct sounds like an amazing site. I'd love to go somewhere like that where you've got that many swifts coming in and out. must be an amazing thing to see. So, you know, maybe you could build an event around that and invite people. You know, that would be something quite exciting to go and look at, perhaps.
Yeah,
you know, interesting architecture as well.
Oh yeah, it's amazing, Dan. The noise, because it just bounces off the arches. But I did do for 4 or 5 weeks, we did sort of Canal and River Trust surveys. So the ecologists came, and then once it picked up a bit of momentum, I did and I got permission from the landowners, because we own right directly under the arches but not the access. So I got in touch with the farmer, and I've done it as an official event. So we did have people coming from Oswestry, Sarah Gibson came, we've had people from Chirk and the surrounding villages just come in and stand in for 2 hours just to have a look, and it's been wonderful. But I did want to do it sort of slowly, just getting that confidence to engage people, because you say swifts and people think mess, and it's trying to differentiate between swallows, house martins and swifts at the same time. So not discriminating against all of them, but trying to focus just on the one. But so far it has been wonderful. But yeah, winter's going to be sort of the project really, to get that literature to give to people. But as soon as you speak to them and you say, oh, they fly from Africa, they sleep in the air, and then people are amazed then. You can't comprehend that. So that initial conversation does help. But I know there's a couple of sites across the road from me, but finding them and then knocking on the door, I think if I alert residents to something that they've got that they don't want, will it make it worse? That's the difficulty. If you know that it's there and you record it, at least you can protect it if scaffolding goes up. It's difficult, isn't it, if people think, oh, I've got something in my house.
It's hard to gauge it, and you can't tell what, you know, what people's feelings are about things, perhaps, until you've already opened the conversation. But I would err on the side of, you know, kind of having faith in people's genuine, you know, good intentions when it comes to birds. But David's just added a chat about that.
Yeah, most people have been brilliant once you do talk to them. So I think the swift walks and sort of a regular meet, and then conversations with neighbours seems to be quite positive. But I don't know if you saw, is it Olbus Swifts? They do the welcome back party every year, which sounds mad, but it works. So they literally stand in the street with the flag and welcome them back. And I thought, I'm going to do that. Just so people think, if it's big enough and it's mad enough, people will remember it and dress the windows, that sort of thing. So there's some plans there, but I've got 3 boxes, 1 apex box with 12 gaps in, and I've had nothing. So I can't really encourage this. This is infuriating, but we'll get there in the end.
don't give up. That's what I'd say, because, you know, it takes time. It takes time, it seems, and you know, if you build it, they may eventually come. I think that's the
eventually.
But I agree. I like the idea of the welcome back, because it's something I've realised. I mean, for myself, it's always a big thing. Like, you know, when's it coming? When the first one you see back, and I think it's the same for a lot of people. You know, really, it feels like that means it's now officially kind of, you know, the season started and summer's on its way, sort of thing. So maybe we could capitalize more on that beginning of the season thing, because most of the, you know, Swift Awareness Week, for understandable reasons, is later in the year when you've got more chance of seeing more swifts. But that thing about seeing the first one back in May is a definite it is a definite thing. And it would be like nice to capitalize on that idea of, you know, us welcoming back, making a kind of connection that, you know, they spend most of the year over in Africa, and then they choose to come back to us. We are lucky that they choose to come back to us. That's perhaps the way to look at it. And it's the same with the house martins and swallows. You know, we should be just feeling blessed that they decide to come back to us, I suppose.
Yeah, but thank you very much. There's some wonderful ideas there, and I know the winter's going to go really quickly for me here, but the welcome back party does sound good.
Yeah, it's great. It's great.
That'll catch on, but yeah, thank you.
good luck. Yeah, fantastic. Hope it goes well in Chirk. Sounds exciting.
Brilliant. I think unless anyone has got any other questions or anything, I think we're pretty much at 7:30. So Ben, thank you so much. What is that?
Just fell off the wall. Bizarrely.
Thank you so much. That was amazing to hear that, and thank you for your incredible Swift work around North Wales. Yeah, brilliant stuff. Thanks everyone for coming this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
See you soon.
Cheers, Ben. Thanks everyone. Bye bye.
Yeah. Diolch o galon pawb. Thanks very much. And, yeah, see you all soon.
Diolch.